Tonight, Chicago reacts to the sacking of Venezuela. Meanwhile, the fallen dictator pleads not guilty in New York federal court. The U.S. military celebrates a successful operation. But what does the future hold for Venezuela, the U.S., and the world?
Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Schutz. An incumbent Democratic governor changes their mind and chooses to bow out for a third term leading an upper Midwest state. That governor is Tim Walz of Minnesota, unless you were curious. He made the stunning announcement today amid turmoil and messaging from the GOP about rampant reported fraud in Minnesota's social safety net system. And you see Tim Walz making that announcement today. Now, President Donald Trump has long been critical of the Minnesota governor and one-time vice presidential candidate. He had less kind words to say today about Walz's tenure.
And he's a stupid man, and he's a corrupt politician. And the Somalians are ripping off our country to the tune of, looks like $19 billion.
Minnesota faces enormous challenges this year, and I refuse to spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment.
And now, of course, to the big news of the day. Deposed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pleads not guilty in a New York federal courtroom. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, face charges of conspiracy and narco-terrorism here in the States. Maduro says he is a, quote, innocent man, a good man, and, quote, he was kidnapped by the United States. Meanwhile, Trump administration officials have repeated the messaging that the capture is a law enforcement action, not a declaration of war. At a United Nations Security Council meeting, the body's undersecretary expressed concern among the international community.
I remain deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the 3 January military action. The Charter enshrines the prohibition of the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state.
But UN Ambassador Mike Waltz leaned into the messaging that the action did not violate international law and will not be part of an ongoing conflict.
The United States wants a better future for Venezuela. We believe a better future for the people of Venezuela and for the people of the region and the world is stabilizing the region and making the neighborhood that we live in a much better and safer place. And this is why millions of Venezuelans that have fled this brutal regime are celebrating and cheering around the world.
And a split reaction locally, many local Venezuelan expats celebrating the purported end of Maduro's dictatorial reign, while other protest groups condemn the action by President Trump that they believe violates U.S. and international law.
They want to be dictator in open violation of international law and U.S. law, invading a sovereign country, kidnap their president, kidnap their first lady, and call this just. This is a criminal act and must be denounced.
A dictatorship has killed and committed a lot of crimes in our country during 25 years, more than 25 years actually, all right? So we are here celebrating with the Venezuelan support what President Trump is doing. We are not against it. We support it. Every Venezuelan around the world, and we're talking about 10 million Venezuelans around the world, are supporting this.
This is just the beginning. Joining me to dig in further, Tom Makaitis, professor of world history at DePaul University, Karen Alter, professor of international law, politics at Northwestern University, and Luciano Pedota, president of the Illinois Venezuelan Alliance, a great group of folks here to really dig into this. Luciano Pedota, is it fair to say, as you just heard from one of your countrymen there, that the vast majority of Venezuelans around the world support this, or are there some that are concerned that it was a violation of that country's sovereignty?
I think it is fair to say. I mean, we're not passing judgment on, whether this was a violation of international law. Really, that's for the international organizations and institutions and courts to decide. what we're very happy is that Maduro has finally been removed. I mean, it's been a year since the opposition won the election in Venezuela. We won the election with a majority of 70%. And Maduro denied it. I mean, bluntly denied the victory of the opposition. And this is the third time that he does this. I mean, the previous two elections, the opposition was not able to to have the evidence that the election had been stolen. But this time, the opposition did come up with a system to digitalize all the voting reports from 30,000 machines. They were uploaded to an iCloud. They were tallied. And, they were shown to the rest of the world. So a lot of liberal democracies and institutions like the Carter Center verified that, in fact, the opposition won. So Maduro just doesn't want to allow for the transfer of power.
All right. Despite that, Karen Alter, it does seem to be consensus that Maduro might have been an illegitimate leader and stolen the election. But short of declaring war and going through Congress, is there any part of U.S. or international law that supports the sacking of a sovereign country's leader?
Absolutely not. The U.S. has been committing a number of acts of aggression against Venezuela, blowing up the boats, killing a summary execution of people on the boats, attacking a dock, which was on Venezuelan soil, and now going and breaching the territorial integrity of Venezuela and kidnapping their president. International law is very clear that all of these are acts of aggression, as is a blockade on the oil industry. So, there was a little more tolerance when it looked like it was a big pressure campaign. But really, the line has been very much crossed, and we need to worry about how action is taken. Do we want any country around the world to be able to make an indictment up? And then Russia to be able to go in and snatch Vladimir Zelensky? Do we want Xi Jinping to be able to go into Taiwan and say, we don't think the president there is legitimate? There are rules about how this is done, and the rules are designed to promote peace. And we already see many countries being concerned that the U.S. might use military force because President Trump has threatened to take military action in Panama, in Colombia, in Greenland. One of my colleagues sent an email today saying that the Trump administration has used military force in 9 countries this year alone. So it's very, very concerning. It does matter how it's done.
Tom Makaitis, is there any scenario now going forward where the situation in Venezuela can be managed without U.S. boots on the ground, without getting into some kind of prolonged quagmire?
I'm not optimistic about that. I have nothing good to say about Maduro. On the other hand, I share Karen's concerns about how this was done, the precedent it sets, and the president let slip in his remarks at the press conference when he referred to oil. What I think is really about, as well as his own ego. He very much is into projection of power. People don't realize before this, the U.S. Coast Guard was quite capable of stopping boats, searching them, confiscating contraband if there was any, and apprehending wrongdoers. There was no need to be, basically murdering people in extrajudicial killings when they had the ability to do that. And a number of naval officers have actually gone to not-for-profit legal organizations to get advice as to what their obligations and responsibilities are, because they no longer trust the Judge Advocate General's Corps, which is now filled with cronies.
With loyalists, so a purge there. But going back to you, Luciano, you talk about the fact that the opposition, by all tallies, won the last election. They were denied power. That's led by Maria Corina Machado. Who had basically been seen as the leader of the opposition movement, even though she wasn't the person on the ballot. So then what is the point of removing a dictator like Maduro if his entire regime is going to stay in power, including his vice president, now sworn in as the interim president?
Yeah. The Venezuelan situation or the crisis is extremely complex. I mean, you have to really have spent time, years, following everything that's going on in Venezuela. For example, right now, I think that with the removal of Maduro, what you're removing is really the Cuban component. So, we talk about sovereignty and territory integrity. Cubans have, with permission of Maduro, they have basically taken over the institutions in Venezuela. They control all the ID systems. They control the people with food programs. I mean, they are the mastermind. I don't think that Maduro or Chavismo would have been able to stay in power for 27 years, denying the democracy to the Venezuelan people, had it not been for the Cubans. I mean, this is like the Cubans, the Castro communists, perfecting their system, and then wanting to take control of the Venezuelan oil. I mean, you guys are historians. You know that Fidel Castro tried to invade Venezuela in 1967. I was being born then, and he tried to invade Venezuela because he was going after the oil. And so he was repelled by the Venezuelan army. So we have, ever since 1958, we have a democratic tradition in Venezuela. And ever since Chavez came to power, and I'm not saying that there were not justifiable reasons for Chavez to come to power, because there was a lot of social injustice and inequality in Venezuela. But ever since, democracy has been undermined, and little by little, they just we're living in a dictatorship, basically.
And at least in the interim, Professor Alter, the Trump administration has had mixed messaging in terms of who actually is in charge of the country. Initially, he said the U.S. will be running it. Then his Secretary of State Rubio walked it back. But then again today, Trump doubled down, saying, no, the United States is running it. Folks like Hegseth, Rubio, then ultimately him are running Venezuela. What do you believe that looks like if we take the president at his word?
Actually, what I see going on is a whole bunch of backpedaling. So President Trump keeps saying things that the rest of his team is like, no, we don't want to do this. This is not our plan. And you played this the clip of Michael Waltz at the UN saying this is a police action. That is a huge de-escalation, a law enforcement action. It's not credible, but it's a huge de-escalation of what has been claimed. This was an imperial action propagated for the purpose of gaining control of oil. And that is so illegitimate and so unacceptable that the diplomats are trying to say, no, we're not going to try to control Venezuela. We're not going to run Venezuela. That would be colonial settleism, and occupation. And occupation didn't work out very well for us. In Iraq, for example, which also had a huge oil industry, where also people thought if we just depose Saddam Hussein, the world will be a better place and we can pay for the reconstruction using oil. And it didn't turn out that way at all. So I'm happy to see the U.S. de-escalating, and I think it is smart for leaders like the Colombian president and Denmark's president to start escalating the crisis of, if you keep doing this, if you keep using force and making imperial claims, we are going to push back on you. So we'll see if Trump's team can actually get him to back off from what I actually do think is his desire to control the oil industry in Venezuela.
And certainly he's made no bones of the oil and U.S. companies getting at that oil being a major justification. Tom Makaitis, when he says that Venezuela, which, by the way, controls the largest oil reserves in the world, that they, quote unquote, stole these reserves from American companies, and American companies have a right to this oil. What is he talking about? Is there any legal truth to that?
I can't speak to legal, but I think they could as easily say that the Venezuelans stole it back. Look, I want to push back a little bit on the claim about the Cubans. I'm very skeptical of that, but I'm not an expert on Venezuela. But America's track record in Latin America is horrendous. We propped up a brutal regime in El Salvador that ran death squads and murdered Jesuit priests. We tried to overthrow the Noriega regime in Nicaragua. We've intervened in Mexico. We are seeing a return to gunboat diplomacy. And yes, when the oil that was prospected, the Venezuelans, between the two world wars, they didn't have the resources or the infrastructure to do that. But you can be darn sure those oil companies extracted a great deal of profit. So I cannot be critical of the government that said, okay, enough's enough. Now the proceeds of this oil need to go overwhelmingly to the Venezuelan people. Again, I'm no fan of Maduro. I was no fan of Hugo Chavez. I want to be really clear. I'm not at all naive about their brutality. But our track record in the Caribbean and Latin America is extraordinarily poor. And if the president is so committed to democracy, why has he already come out and said that the leader of the opposition who got the Nobel Peace Prize is not acceptable as a new leader of the country? And if you really want the Venezuelans to have democracy, let them pick who they want to be their leader, not us.
We already did.
You did, yeah, I know. But our president is saying, our president is undermining that and saying he has to agree on who it is.
Yeah,
so
that took us by surprise. I mean, don't worry. That we're very surprised about that.
Yeah,
but when you talk about proceeds of the Venezuelan oil going to the Venezuelan people, well, that's not happening. The proceeds of the Venezuelan oil is going to Cuba, is going to China to pay an amount of debt that Maduro incurred in. You know, we are in debt and poor, like Haiti probably. Do you know what I mean? And so this is like Maduro and the regime. They have looted our country. The corruption is rampant. And the Venezuelan people have not seen any benefit from the proceeds.
Luciano, let me ask you this. Should there be elections then in short order in Venezuela?
Well, we hope so. I think that what we're trying to promote from our organization is that a return to a democratic system. How we get there is a whole different question. It's going to be a process. It took us also by surprise that Vice President Delcy Rodriguez was named to be the president and the person who's going to coordinate this transition. We think that there are factions within the Chavismo that are more radical and that this is not going to be a clean process. Yeah. We don't know how much they're going to obey the requests and demands of the United States government. And so we're being cautious. So we're just holding back and see how things unfold.
And I think
Paris, I'm happy to answer the question you asked about the oil claim, if you'd like to
go
give
for yes, go ahead, Professor Alter.
Okay, so Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil industry. He continued the process of nationalization, which is not a violation of international law, and he paid compensation for the nationalization. Now, at a very low rate, he was trying to rebalance who was winning from this agreement. And two of the oil companies decided to leave, and they filed investor disputes, and they won a claim, and they were trying to get paid more money. But Chevron did not leave and made a new arrangement with Hugo Chavez and stayed in producing oil. So it's not a violation of international law, and it's Venezuelan oil. It's under their territory. It is their oil. It's just a contract under which the terms by which you're gonna develop the oil.
All right.
Let me just say one thing to Mr. Pedrosa. The Organization of American States would have been the place to deal with the fact that the election was stolen. So there were other processes.
We've been there.
I don't agree Maduro is bad, but
we've been there.
It's still the ends do not justify the means.
We were there years ago. The same thing. It just never gets resolved. We've been trying to get rid of
the thing I was going to bring up is the fact that
13 years.
There's a middle ground here. I think nobody's crying over Maduro being gone. I do agree the way it was done is highly problematic. But what I'm far more worried about is if we replace one person, one entity exploiting Venezuelans with another, that's not going to benefit anybody. I know what Chavez did. I'm a military historian. I know lots of money was siphoned off to cronies. A lot of it was, was to purchase weapons and do all kinds of stuff.
All right, guys.
I'm sorry.
We got to. This is a great discussion. We got to get a break in here.
Is not to have the Trump administration come in and now we're going to determine who's going to control the oil, who's going to govern Venezuela. I want Venezuelans.
Let's take a break. Let's take a break, and we're going to be right back with more of this discussion right after this. Thanks, guys. All right, welcome back, and we have more with our panel. Let me reintroduce them. Professor Karen Alter from Northwestern, Professor Tom Makaitis from DePaul, and Luciano Pedota from the Illinois-Venezuelan Alliance. A very robust conversation here, guys. And it seems like there's a lot of parallels, you know, in history that we can draw on here. Iraq comes to mind, Panama, and Panama obviously was a lot less deadly, at least for U.S. forces, and a lot less of a quagmire than Iraq was. And I want to bring up one more parallel, and that's Iran in the 1950s. I mean, the British and the U.S. literally did overthrow a democratically elected government there over oil, over their decision to nationalize oil. We know that country has not been the same in the 80 years since. So, Karen Alter, I'll pose this question to you. Which of these sort of examples closely mirrors what you fear or what you expect could happen with Venezuela?
Wow, that's quite a question. I think that the Iraq situation is analogous in the sense of the hope and the dream that once Saddam Hussein was gone, things would be better. There's also another lesson from Iraq, which is that we thought that taking over was going to be really easy, and they fired all of the people who supported Saddam Hussein's regime. And many of those people became advisors and workers for ISIS. So it led to a very broad destabilization. So we really, if the goal is to help Venezuelans, then we should be helping the Venezuelans negotiate a transition. It can't just be a wholesale, we pick the leader who is going to be there. There should be a collaborative set of pressure. You know, there's 8 million Venezuelans around Latin America. There's a lot of countries who have concerns about the stability and concerns about the drug trade. And so if the U.S. really does want to help Venezuela, then work with the Organization of American States or the United Nations or a larger set of actors to try to come up with a plan that can actually help Venezuela. But that's naive for me to say that, because we know that has nothing to do with the intentions of the Trump administration, and they will never do this. Nor is fighting drugs really the goal of the Trump administration. He just pardoned the ex-president of Honduras, who had been convicted of drug trafficking.
Certainly, yes. So the justification that Venezuela was trafficking major quantities of drugs to the U.S., and that's the justification for this, seems to really not hold up very well to scrutiny. But Tom Makaitis, you know, Iraq, clearly the Bush administration didn't understand or at least didn't pay heed to the sectarian divisions in that country. And the fact, as Professor Alter just brought up, that he dismantled Saddam's government. So when you go into Venezuela, is it similar in terms of sectarian division, warlords, drug lords, or is it a vastly different situation?
I can't speak to that. I'll allow our colleague from the Venezuelan Alliance to address that. What I can tell you is, going into Iraq, we not only didn't understand, I knew people in the U.S. military who wanted to plan for a phase 4 stabilization mission, and they were cut off at the knees and told not to do that. We're going to Baghdad, removing Saddam, and democracy will automatically rise up like a flower in the spring, and we can just leave. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen. We keep forgetting there is this "you break it, you bought it" rule. And, you know, when you remove an autocrat, you often have a period of chaos, not a period of stability. I would back what Karen said, and I would add to it, what about a Latin American stabilization force that is not representing one of the major powers? You know, I think that would be healthier, but I agree with her. It's not going to happen. They have an agenda. They want to exploit the resources, and they want a government that is compliant. And Venezuela is not either a primary producer or a primary narco trafficking country. 80% of the fentanyl is coming through the southern border of the United States through Mexico.
All right, well, Luciano Pedota, let me propose that question to you. What is the void that's being left here? Is it a divided country with sectarian issues? Are there concerns that drug organizations could fill some of this vacuum of power? What's the reality on the ground?
No, I know it's a complex reality. I mean, there are different factions within Chavismo. There are the colectivos, civilians who are armed to the teeth to defend the revolution, you know. So I know it is complex, and I think that that's the reason why President Trump decided to negotiate with Delcy Rodriguez as the coordinator to facilitate the transition. So it's going to have to be the Chavismo who, if they want to avoid a war or they want to avoid the destiny of Maduro, right, who are going to have to negotiate internally to find a pathway to a transition. So it is complex. It does have the potential for conflict, armed conflict. I think some war games that were being done by the U.S. government estimated that if there was a full-blown out war inside Venezuela led by United States intervention, there would be something like 1,000 U.S. soldiers
Luciano,
that would die and 20,000 Venezuelan
I'm sorry, I got to cut you off there. We are out of time.
So,
My thanks to Karen Alter, Tom Makaitis, Luciano Pedota. Good night, everybody. Thanks.